Thank you so much, Seema ma'am. Thank you so much, Jay sir, for this warm welcome and kind introduction. A very pleasant morning to all of you. Today's topic for the day is changes in the ITRs of AY 2021. I'll just share my screen with you all so that we can continue with the topic. So, first of all, the very first question, which came in every chartered accountant's mind 15 days back was the 724 pages of the instruction module, which was issued by the CBDT. Okay, at some point of time, it was like as if they have given the extension to just read this 724 pages instruction module. So first of all, I will like to break the myth with respect to this instruction module which has been put out by the CBDT. So I've just compiled a reconciliation. Okay, every as you all know that every year, ITRs and corresponding instruction sheet comes out along with the ITRs. In this year, they have taken 4 months to draw up the instruction module. Now, earlier, in the last assessment year, the instruction module runs around 340 pages, whereas in this year's this assessment year's instruction module runs around 720 pages, which is around two times of the last year's instruction module. So what is the main reason behind this huge module, behind this huge number of pages which they have inserted? So the only reason is category A defect is what they call. Okay, so what are category A defects? Category A defects are the defects wherein the written will not be allowed to be uploaded. Okay, and error message will be displayed to the taxpayer. So now this is the definition, or this is the meaning which is assigned to this category A defect by the CBDT. Now this is not something which is new. Okay, this was there even in the last year. However, it was meant only for the IT technicians. Okay, only for the people who were developing softwares for filing return of income. Okay, this table, okay, this thing was meant for them. However, they have copy pasted or inserted this module, okay, category A defects in the instruction sheet itself. So say suppose in case you're filing return of income and in the field of section 80C, if you enter okay amount, say suppose 2 lakh, okay, then a error pops up or a information pops up that the maximum deduction allowable under chapter 6 say okay under the specified section will should not exceed 1,50,000 rupees. So this error message or this information message which pops up, okay, is a kind of category A defect. Say suppose you skipped your name, okay, in the ITR general information, if you forgot to type your name over there, then in that case, okay, the error message will pop up or the ITR will direct you to that page and tell that please fill in your name. So this is also kind of category A defect. So this is nothing to do with any legal aspect or any procedural aspect. This was there even in the last year's ITR, but it was only meant for the schema people. Okay, the schema comes up, and in that schema this table was inserted. However, now they have inserted this table in the instruction module itself. Okay, so as you can see on my screen, there are around 2,900 various permutations and combinations of these defects, okay, which can arise while you file ITR. Okay, without clearing this defect, you will not be able to upload your ITR. You will have to first address all these defects. So these are the kind of category A defects. Almost 330 pages are assigned only for category A defects. So now your the instruction sheet or the instruction module comes down to only 390 pages from the 720 pages. Now what is the reason for this 50-page increase from the last year? The main reason behind is the new schedules which they have inserted, namely Schedule DI, Schedule ATD, Schedule TPSA, or other relevant changes, as per the applicable law for assessment year 2021. So just a brief introduction that what was, why was that instruction module so voluminous? So this is the main reason. Nothing to worry. No any legal, any legal aspect or any particular technical aspect discussed in those category A defects. Fine. So that was the first thing. Now we can start with the main context, that is filing of return of income. So before filing of return of income, as you all know, that we need to determine the residential status of the assessee. So what are the changes with respect to residential status for AY 2021? Okay, as you all know that the taxability of the income will depend on the residential status. The reporting requirement of certain reporting requirement in the ITRs also depend on the residential status. So now, because of the COVID position, COVID, etc., this pandemic and all, the department had come up with circular number 11 of 2020, wherein they have scaled down the last date. Okay, generally, in order to determine the residential status, we check the number of days from 1st of April to the 31st of March of the following year. However, in case of certain people, who have come to India but have got, stuck up of here or have got stranded here because of the COVID position. Okay, the lockdown was announced on a particular date, say suppose 23rd of March. So now they have told, I mean, the CBDT has come up with this circular wherein they have said that the period from 22nd of March to 31st of March must be ignored. Okay, it must not be taken into account while determining the residential status. So while calculating the number 182 days, for an example, you have to check from the 1st of April to 21st of March. Okay, from 22nd to 31st, the period will not be counted. Similarly, if any foreigner or an NRI has been quarantined on or after first day of March, and because of which he is not able to leave India, or if he has left India through evacuation flight, then in that case also the quarantine period or from any period from 1st of March till the date of time we left India, okay, the person left India, or if he is not able to leave India, then whole of that period will not be considered for determining his residential status. So this is the very first thing. Mainly it will affect the NRIs. Okay, many people schedule their plan. I mean, they completely plan out the number of days so that the residential status should not change, etc. So for them this relaxation was given. So that is the very first point. Now we come to the notifications of ITR. Okay, so when was the ITR first notified? So fortunately, obviously it is unfortunate because of COVID. However, the CBDT, initially in the month of January, 3rd of January, had notified ITR 1 as well as ITR 4. Okay, which are they are the most commonly used ITRs. They had notified that. However, there were certain stringent provisions. I mean, certain stringent provision with respect to eligibility. Okay, the one being that if that person, if the assessee, okay, he owns a house property in joint ownership with two or more person, then he cannot file ITR 1 or ITR 4. He has to either go for ITR 2 or ITR 3. Same way, if the person attracts 7th proviso to section 139(1), okay, if he has to file the return of income because of that 7th proviso, then also he was not liable to use ITR 1 or ITR 4. Similarly, in ITR 4, there were specific requirement to, you have to indicate the opening balance, receipts, payment, as well as closing balance of your cash account. Okay, so that was something which was, a kind of hectic job, or it was something, a complicated job for a small businessman to make an account of cash. Okay, so all this was there in the earlier notified ITR, the notification number 1 of 2020. However, now the CBDT has superseded this notification. This instructions or this eligibility criteria does not exist at all. Okay, so it does not exist at all now. So what is the new notification? Okay, what is the new notification? The new notification is notification number 31 of 2020. Okay, dated 29th of May 2020. So when this notification came, the earlier ITRs, okay, ITR 1 as well as ITR 4 got superseded. So those, those eligibility condition, etc., are no longer there. Okay, you just have to go with the new instruction module, the new notification. So as per the newly notified ITR, the eligibility conditions which were prevailing for AY 1920, okay, the same exist here also for AY 2021. There is no change now. So whatever we had discussed, okay, in the previous slide is now superseded. No need to go into that. Okay, those conditions are now, obliterated. They are not there in the statute now. So we just run through in a fast track mode the eligibility condition. They are same as last year, so nothing new. Okay, as we all know, ITR 1 is for the resident, only for resident. Okay, resident and ordinary resident. That is the main thing. The person has to be also ordinary resident in India, having income from salary, one house property, or other source in the nature of interest income. Okay, and his total income should not exceed 50 lakh rupees. Just one point I want to point out over here. As per the instruction module of the CBDT, okay, it says that in case of ITR 1, if the assessee has income from one house property, it mentions income from one house property, then he can use ITR 1. However, as per my personal opinion, as per my personal reading of rule number 12 of the income tax rules, it says income from house property where assessee does not own more than one house. So there is difference between these two sentences. Okay, where the assessee does not own more than one house. Okay, so in case as per rule 2, as per rule 12, if you read, it says if the assessee is owning more than one house, then he cannot opt for ITR 1. Whereas the instruction says that in case assessee has income from one house property, he can go for ITR 1. Now the practical scenario I will tell you in this case is, say suppose I have two house property, both are owned by me. The first one is self-occupied, okay, and the second one is empty. As per the amended provisions, now I can treat two property as self-occupied property. Okay, so in this case, my income from house property will be nil. Okay, there is no income from house property as the ALV will be nil for both of them, SOP. However, if you read instruction module, okay, by instruction module, if you go, then you do not have income from house property more than, one house property. So you can go for ITR 1. However, rule 12 says that in case the assessee owns more than one house property, then he cannot opt for ITR 1. So in such cases, my personal opinion is that you must go for ITR 2 and not ITR 1. Okay, similarly, if I have one house property and the other house property is let out, in that case also, as per instruction, I have only one house property from which income is there. So as per instruction of the CBDT, I can fill up ITR 1. However, as per rule 12, I own more than one house property and hence I am not able to file ITR 1. So this is the point which I wanted to point it out. Okay, however, in the instruction modules, they have specifically mentioned that in case there is any confusion between the instruction module and the statute, then the statute must be prevailed. Okay, and the statute must be referred. So only one small point which I wanted to point out. And the second ITR, third ITR, ITR 2, ITR 3, okay, they, everything is similar. Okay, no change in the eligibility criteria. Okay, ITR 4 for presumptive taxation, ITR 5 for partnership form, LLPs, okay, AOP, BOI, okay, representative SSC, etc. Same way ITR 6 for corporates, body corporates as well as foreign LLPs, foreign companies, etc. And ITR 7, as you all know, with respect to trust, then you can say news agency, research association, etc. So whatever the conditions were prevailing in the last assessment year, the same are prevailing even for this assessment year. Okay, so now as we have gone through the eligibility criteria, we come to the changes in the ITR as compared to the ITR which was prevailing for EY 1920. So the first change is with respect to Schedule DI. This is directly relating to the COVID position which we are facing right now. As you all know, the government had relaxed, the time for investment or time for payment. Okay, because of the COVID situation. Okay, generally people invest in some ATC, etc. The whichever the list is specified for ATC, they generally do in the March end. Okay, and the lockdown was announced for the last week of March. So in those cases, the government had extended the time limit and they had told that even if you are investing or even if you are paying the amount in the subsequent financial year, that is in the financial year 2021, okay, up to a specified date, say suppose 31st of July, then also you can apportion that amount for AY 2021, that is the preceding financial year. So the first extension was with respect to Chapter 6A Part B, ATC to ATGGC. Okay, so even if you have made a contribution to PPF on 1st of July, then also you have the option to apportion it for the previous assessment year. I mean the AY 2021. even it is paid in the subsequent financial year. Same way for a 10AA, section 10AA says that there was a sunset clause, okay, which according to which the SEZ unit must have started their manufacturing activity, commence their manufacturing activity by 31st of March 2020. However, due to lockdown, etc., some might not be able to commence this activity and they may not get the benefit of section 10AA. In order to relax this provision, okay, they have extended this thing, okay, this date for commencing of the manufacturing from 31st of March 2020 to 31st of March 2021. Okay, this date 31st of March 2021 is as per the Relaxation Act, which just came in the this month, okay, 2020, Taxation and Other Laws Relaxation Act. And the third point, okay, the third extension was with respect to making investment, okay, constructing a new house or purchasing a new house with respect to capital gains. Okay, in this case also they've extended the time limit. So whatever if say suppose the last date, okay, 3 years or 2 years for purchase of new house was expiring on say suppose 24th of March, but because of COVID you could not do it. Then they have now given the option that you can purchase the new house or you can construct the new house by 30th of September, and you can apportion this investment or you can apportion this payment for financial year 1920, that is assessment year 2021. So this was the third change. I've taken the snapshots of the ITRs, okay, and the procedure which you need to follow. The first is with respect to part A of schedule DI. This is the new schedule. First of all, you have to indicate in schedule 6A that whether you are willing to apportion any of the payment made between 1st of April to 31st of July for the previous financial year, that is for the assessment year 2021. So you have to click yes or no. Okay, if you click yes, then the schedule DI will be enabled. Secondly, the second step would be to fill up the relevant schedule. Say suppose ATG, then you have to fill up the schedule ATG, okay, all the details of your donation. ATD, then all the Mediclaim etc details you have to put in there, ATD. Same way, chapter 6 is suppose ATC is there, then all the relevant details for the deduction you are claiming, you have to fill in those sheets, I mean fill in those fields. Okay, and thirdly, everything, okay, once you fill up this relevant schedule, everything will be auto populated in schedule DI. But the first condition is you have to tick yes. Okay, you can see on the screen on chapter schedule 6A. Okay, so it will be auto populated in schedule DI. Now what is schedule DI? DI only mentions it is a kind of reporting schedule wherein you have to just inform the government that out of the payment made in financial year 2021 or from the 1st of April to 31st of July, what is the amount you are apportioning for the previous financial year. Okay, so this is only a reporting schedule, nothing to do with the computation. Okay, your computation will remain intact, you just have to inform. This is because in the subsequent year you do not claim double deduction of the same amount. Okay, so this is kind of information schedule which you have to provide to the government. So a simple schedule, everything will be populated in schedule DI. You just have to apportion the amount in the second column, that what was the amount. This is with respect to 10AA. Here also you have to inform, okay, the date on which the approval of the under the SEZ Act was received. Okay, it has to be on or before 31st of March. However, if you are not able to commence your operation, commence your production in that time, then whether it was commenced after 1st of April, okay, on or after 1st of April and before 30th of September. Okay, so that you have to inform them whether you have complied with the conditions of section 10AA or not. And in the Taxation and Other Laws Relaxation Act, they have extended this time limit for commencement of production from 30th of September to 31st of March 2021. Okay, so now that sunset clause, we can say it has been extended by 1 more year. However, the approval has to be before 31st of March 2020, on or before 31st of March 2020. So this was with respect to part B. And this is the last part, that is part number C with respect to capital gains. In this also, first you have to fill up the schedule CG, that is relevant, relevant schedule for capital gains. Okay, so whatever capital gain is coming, everything has to be filled up over there. Complete details of purchase, investment, capital gain account scheme, deposit in capital gain account scheme has to be given over there. Once you do that, okay, automatically the data will be fetched in this schedule DI. Say suppose in this example which I have taken, says there was amount utilized from capital gain account scheme of say suppose 60 lakh rupees. So here the auto populated amount will come, and now here I have to inform that what was the amount, okay, which was deposited by me in the CNAG account, okay, in the subsequent financial year, okay, say suppose from 1st of April to 30th of September, okay, that will also be a kind of valid compliance, okay, and you will get the deduction for AY 2021. So this is also kind of reporting schedule, so that in the subsequent year you do not claim double deduction of the same amount. So that was with respect to schedule DI. I've just taken some extracts from FAQ of PM Care funds. Many of us must have contributed to PM Care fund. So just a small snapshot of the FAQs taken from the PM Care fund. So first question is with respect to whether this contribution to PM Care fund is exempt or not. So it is 100% allowable as deduction without qualification limit. Okay, so whatever you have contributed will be allowed as your deduction. Second is that PM fund care is itself a trust, so income or the donation received by it will not be taxable. That is for the PM care fund. Okay. Now for the assessee, yeah, with respect to corporates, it is now allowed. If you are contributing to PM care fund, it will be allowed as CSR expenditure, and the consequence of it is it will be also be allowable under section 37. As you all know that the second proviso to section 37 says that CSR expenditure cannot be claimed as deduction of business expenditure. But however, they have allowed PM care contribution as CSR expenditure. So this is also mentioned in the PM care FAQ. And the last point is with respect to PAN number. Okay, many of us must have contributed. So this is the PAN number which you need to fill in schedule ATG, where the PAN of the donee must be mentioned. So this is the PAN. So just a general information. Now we come to the next important change in the ITR, which is with respect to 7th proviso. Okay, so as you all know, in the finance budget, last Finance Act, this modification was made. Okay, there are two things which I would like to point out over here with respect to 7th proviso or with respect to 139, section 139. The first thing is, as per the Finance Act 2019, Act number 2, okay, in that Finance Act, they had specified that while calculating the maximum amount which is not chargeable to income tax, you should ignore the deductions, okay, claimed for certain sections of capital gains, say section 54, section 54B, 54D, EC, etc. Okay, so say suppose if I have no income, I have zero income, but I have a long-term capital gain of 1 CR. Okay, and I had invested that 1 CR in a new property. So before this amendment came, okay, my calculation for calculating the maximum amount not chargeable to tax would be 0, because at that point of time I was allowed to take the deduction of this amount. However, now for calculating this maximum amount, I will have to ignore the deduction, and accordingly my receipt or the income will be 1 crore, and I will be mandatory. It will be mandatory for me to file the return of income. So the very first important point is, please do not deduct this. No, don't claim deduction of this amount. Okay, while ascertaining the eligibility for filing return of income. That is the first point. Obviously, you can claim the deduction in the return of income. That is fine, and eventually your even tax may be nil in the cases which I explained. Secondly, very important, the 7th proviso. Now, 7th proviso specifically says that when the assessee is not required to file ITR by any other provisions, okay, so any other conditions or any other time limits, or so not time limits, the threshold limits are not compliant, okay, it is within the threshold limit, then also in those cases actually is not liable to file ITR. However, in these three conditions, okay, if he falls under any of these three conditions, then even his income is nil, or even if his income is less than the basic exemption limit, he will be mandatorily required to file ITR. The first condition over here is deposit of amount or aggregate of the amount exceeding 1 crore in one or more current accounts. So two things I will like to point out over here is the first point is deposit of amount. They have only specified deposit of amount. So here it is not that it has to be cash deposit. It can be any kind of deposit. Okay, it can be a cash deposit, check deposit, draft deposit, or ECS, NEFT, RTGS, anything. However, it has to be only current accounts. Okay, it cannot be a saving account. It cannot be your FD, etc. Only in current accounts. If the deposits are exceeding 1 crore rupees, then even if your income is less, still you are liable to file return of income as per the seventh proviso. The very first point. The second point is incurred expenditure of an amount or aggregate of an amount exceeding 2 lakh rupees for a travel to foreign country for own self or for any other person. So this is also kind of an open provision. Okay, in the assessee has to incur expenditure. The first point, it is nowhere it is mentioned that it has to be personal or business. Everything will be covered over here. It can be either personal or even a business expenditure. Okay, so that is the second point. Okay, so if it exceeds 2 lakh rupees to a foreign country, okay, the payment can be in INR or even in the foreign currency. Okay, you have to consider the actual payment considering the both type of payment as well as INR as well as the foreign exchange. And the third point is incurred expenditure of an amount or aggregate of an amount exceeding 1 lakh on consumption of electricity. So here also they are not carving out an exception. It can be your residential premises, it can be your shop, it can be a factory, a commercial property, anything. So if you are assessing, if you are incurring yourself 1 lakh or more, okay, exceeding, sorry, not 1 lakh or more than 1 lakh rupees, then in that case, even if your income is less, you will have to file return of income. So as you all know, this kind of condition also existed during AY, up till AY 6-7. So after that, it were removed, but now they have reintroduced. So it is a kind of economic indicators or economic factors for tracking the assessees who are expending more amount but are not filing return of income for any due reason. So a very important point for filing ITR. That was with respect to seventh proviso. The details with respect to this will be available in general information part A. Okay, so here you will have to mention whether you are filing return of income only under this proviso and otherwise you are not liable to file. Okay, in that case you have to answer yes, and accordingly the following individual indicators. Okay, the individual field will be enabled, and accordingly you have to mention the corresponding amount. Say suppose deposits are there of 2 crore, then you have to mention 2 crore. If your foreign expenditure is more than 2 lakh, then you have to mention the amount of that. Okay. And the third thing I will like to point out is, say in case of some small individuals or small assessees, what we do is, even they are not actually liable to file return of income, we do file the return of income for some bank compliance, etc. Okay. Say suppose in all those cases, actually their income is less than 2 lakh 50 or the basic exemption limit, and they are not even incurring such kind of expenditure, high economic expenditure. Okay, they are not doing that. In that case, your answer to the first question should be no. Okay, because in the note they have specifically mentioned that only if you are filing your return of income because of seventh proviso, only then you have to tick yes, otherwise you have to tick no. Okay, so in all those small clients where the basic exemption is less and even they are not incurring such kind of expenditure, your answer should be no. I have underline the relevant portion. Yeah, so only if you're complying with this condition, then you have to say yes, otherwise it is no. So general, so that was with respect to seventh provision. Now with respect to corporate clients, a very important amendment by the Finance Act or the ordinance thereafter, that is with respect to 115 BAA, okay, particularly for ITR 6. Okay, as we all know that new provisions have come, the new taxation regime as we all call. First of all, if you want to opt for this scheme, then before filing the return of income, you will have to intimate the government that yes, you are opting for this scheme. For that, you will have to file form number 10 IC. Okay, what is 10 IC? It is a form which is prescribed under Rule 21 AE, okay, for opting under this scheme. So a very simple form, a very general form. I have, clause wise, I have indicated what are the contents. Okay, so it has to be filed on the e-portal as you all file the ITRs. It is a one-time filing. Okay, So once you file it will apply for that assessment year as well as the subsequent assessment years. So in the clause number 2, a general information regarding the company name, address, SIN number, etc. has to be furnished. In clause number 3, you have to indicate whether you have any unit in International Financial Service Center or not. This is basically for claiming exemption under section 80 LA. So if you have any unit in this kind of centers, then you have to mention the unit wise details. The fourth clause and the fifth clause is kind of declaration clause, that if at all the assessee has already earlier opted for section 115 BA, then is withdrawing from that and is going under this scheme. And clause number 6 is also kind of declaration that once the option under this scheme is exercised, it cannot be subsequently withdrawn. So this is with the contents of 10 IC, a very simple form. Yeah, just a minute. We'll just have an overview of section 115 BAA. So first of all, the applicability, it will be applicable only to the domestic companies. Very important point, only domestic companies. The rate of taxation will be 22%. However, in case the income, the income is corresponding to the sections which are chargeable at a special rate. Example, 111A, short-term capital gain, long-term capital gain, etc. In those cases, the rate specified in those special sections will be applicable. Otherwise, on all the other incomes, say suppose house property, other sources, PGBP, on all those kind of income, 22% rate will apply. Flat rate of 10% of surcharge will be applicable. Okay, irrespective of your income, 10% surcharge will be applicable. Okay, however, in case your income is with respect to income which is specified under section 115 BEE, that is with respect to crash credit, etc., 68 to 69D. Okay, if your income is ascertained in the tax section, then the rate applicable in section 115 BEE will apply. The health and education says 4% on the surcharge and tax. So effectively, the rate of tax here will be 25.168%. Very important point to note over here is the MAT is not applicable. 115 JB, provisions of 115 JB will not be applicable to such kind of companies. However, please remember that if you have any brought forward credit of MAT credit, okay, 115 JA, okay, so if that credit is there with you, then in that case you cannot set off that credit against the tax payable under this scheme. Okay, that cannot be set off. However, the second point, you can still carry it forward. Okay, though you are not liable to set off against the tax payable, still you can carry it forward. This will be important in kind of cases where, say, suppose presently I am opting for BAA, I am complying the conditions. However, say after 2 years I have violated some conditions, then I will not be, able to take the benefit under 115 BAA, and the normal provisions will apply. And once the normal provisions will apply, the normal tax payable will come, and against that normal tax under the normal provisions of the Act, I can set off this brought forward MAT credit. So if you're claiming this section, okay, you're opting for this section, then please remember that you please do carry forward your MAT credit. It is not that you have to forego it. Okay, you can carry forward your MAT credit. So these are the conditions for opting for 115 BAA. You will have to forego certain type of deductions and exemptions. 10 AA or accelerated deductions, as you all say, 35 AD, 35 AB, etc., etc. Okay, additional depreciation, one of the very important point. Okay, all those things you will have to forego, and even profit linked deductions specified under Part C of Chapter 6A. Okay, even those cannot be claimed by you. However, there are two exemptions, that is with respect to ATJJAA with respect to employment generation, and ATM, that is with respect to cascading effect of dividend taxation. So that can be claimed. Apart from that, no deduction can be claimed once you opt for the scheme. Secondly, very important point, that you cannot carry forward a set of laws which are attributable to the sections which are specified in the first point. Very important point over here is some are under confusion that no laws can be carried forward or no laws can be set off. However, it is only the specified losses which are attributable to the above mentioned sections or accelerated deductions. Okay, only if that unabsorbed losses are there, only then you cannot carry forward or set off. All other losses you can carry forward and set off. Say suppose you have losses from house property, then in that case you can carry forward as well as set off your house property loss against the income which is determined under section 115BAA. That is permissible. The third point is you will have to claim depreciation. As you all know, there is explanation 5 in section 32 which mandates the assessee to claim depreciation. Here also they have mentioned that you have to claim depreciation. However, you cannot claim additional depreciation. Okay, the additional depreciation under clause 2A, okay, of subsection 1, it cannot be claimed. However, they have given one exception, which I have portrayed with the help of an example in the subsequent slide. We will go through it. So this is the implication of on failure to satisfy the conditions. The first and foremost, implication will be their option under section 115BAA will be held invalid. It will be considered as if you have not opted for this section. Okay, and then your income for that assessment year, I mean for the year in which you have committed the violation, as well as for the lifetime, any assessment year to come, okay, you will be debarred from opting under this section. So that is the implication. Yeah, so this is the point which I wanted to point it out with respect to additional depreciation. Okay, clause 2 of subsection 1 of section 32. Just an example for better understanding. Say suppose in financial year 18-19, say in the month of January, we have purchased a eligible plant and machinery, a new plant and machinery, okay, costing rupees 1 lakh. Okay, we put the same in use on the same very day. In that case also, what happens is that the machine has been put for use less than 180 days. And as per the section 32, if the same is the case, then in that case, you will have to claim only half depreciation. Okay. So say suppose the rate of appreciation is 15%, then I have to claim only 7.5%. However, as this plant and machinery was an eligible plant and machinery, I can also claim additional depreciation at 20%. Now, in case of 20% also, if it is put for less than 180 days, then you can claim only half of it, and the half can be claimed in the subsequent assessment year. So in the financial year 18-19, I claim 10,000 only instead of 20,000, and the other 10,000 I will have to claim in AY 2021. That is this assessment year. However, as per 115BAA, as we saw, this kind of additional depreciation is not allowable. In order to mitigate this effect, okay, what government has done is they have told that the unclaimed additional depreciation, okay, which has been carried forward, okay, which has been yet to be claimed in AY 2021, okay, you adjust that amount by increasing your WDV on the first day of April 19. Okay, so now this 10,000, the balancing 10,000 will not be allowable as a direct depreciation. However, it will be added to my WDV. So now accordingly the rate will apply, and for number of years my depreciation on this 10,000 can be claimed. So an upward adjustment has to be made. So just a screenshot of the utility. See, after claiming from 1 lakh, after claiming 7.5 normal depreciation, okay, 7,500 and 10,000 additional depreciation, okay, my WDV on the start of the year comes to 82,500. However, I will have to add the unclaimed additional depreciation of 10,000 to this amount, and my WDV on the first year, on the first day of the assessment year, will be deemed as 92,500 after adding this amount. So this was the first adjustment and the change in ITR. Second adjustment, and a very important adjustment, is with respect to the adjustment of losses. As we all discussed, that certain type of losses which are attributable to that additional additional accelerated deductions, okay, or 10AA, etc., or ATIB, ATSA, etc. Okay, those kind of losses which are attributable to that business or that particular section, then such losses has to be foregone. You cannot carry forward or set off such losses. Okay, so now in ITR they have given a particular column where from you have to mention that amount, and that amount will be reduced from the carry forward losses. So for an example, if I have loss of 1,10,000 rupees, and out of that 50,000 is the kind of loss which is attributable to section 35 AD. In that case, I have to I have to deduct that amount from my carry forward or brought forward losses. So accordingly, the amount which I can carry forward is 60,000 rupees. So this was with respect to carry forwarding losses, a very important point. Yeah, so this was the major changes with respect to 115BAA. Now we come to the another section, 115BAB. Okay, a beneficial provision, only 15% tax rate. However, there are many conditions. Okay, stringent condition as compared to 115BAA. In order to opt for this section, you have to first fill up form number 10 ID. It is similar to 115BAA. Okay, so you have to e-file your return of income. Okay, it's a one-time filing. Okay, once you file this, it will apply for that assessment year as well as the coming assessment years. In clause number 2, you have to fill up the general information of the company. Okay, once the option is exercised, it cannot be withdrawn, similar to 115BAA. Okay, then in clause number 4, you have to give declaration of the entity structure. Okay, there are certain conditions which we'll see in the forthcoming slides, that you should not be an entity which is kind of formed by way of splitting up, reconstitution, etc. Okay, so that is the point which you have to mention, that you have to give declaration. Then declaration about the satisfying the conditions. So whatever conditions are there for opting this section, you have to give a declaration that yes, you are complying with all those kind of conditions. Just an overview. So it is applicable only for domestic manufacturing company. The definition is given in the section itself. Okay, 115BAA was applicable to any domestic company. However, this will apply only to a specified manufacturing company. Okay, so that is the very first point. Second important condition over here is the business, the company has to be registered on or after 1st October 2019. And the company must commence the manufacturing on or before 31st of March 23. Okay, so that is the condition. Now these three conditions very important. Your entity, your company must not be formed by way of splitting up or reconstitution, and plant and machinery has to be new. One exception is that with respect to import from foreign country. So that is one simple exception. Then the premises of your factory or premises which you are using must not be those premises for which deduction under section 80 ID has been claimed. Okay, hotel or convention center, you cannot use those kind of premises for your manufacturing activity. And the last point is, it should not be engaged in any other business. So you cannot do any kind of other business other than the specified manufacturing business. Okay, and the related distribution or production and the related kind of things with respect to only manufacturing. Only you can do that. Apart from that, you cannot do any other kind of business. So this is a kind of stringent condition. Yeah, now we come to the rates of tax. First point, with any income which is incidental, okay, or directly derived from the manufacturing of the production, okay, or manufacturing or production of an article or thing, in those cases, the income is taxed at 15%, a very less rate, 15%. However, if any special income is there, say suppose short-term capital gain, long-term capital gain, etc., in this case, the applicable rate will be applicable. Third important point, very important point, any other sort of income, okay, for which no specific rate is provided, say suppose house property or interest on fixed deposit, in all those cases 22% rate will be applicable. So this is as per the first proviso to section 115BAB. Now I would like to point out a very important point which I have highlighted in red text. No corresponding deduction allowed. By this, while you are calculating house property income, say your income from house property is 1 lakh, then by law you are entitled to get 30% standard deduction. However, if you opt for this scheme, you won't be entitled even to that standard deduction. Okay, your income from house property will be calculated at 1 lakh only, not 70,000, and applicable rate will be 22%. Very important, you cannot claim deduction under section 57(3) against the IFOS income. That cannot be claimed. Very important point for tax planning. The fourth is, whenever there are close, related party kind of transaction, wherein the assessing officer feels that they have tried to generate more profit from manufacturing activity in this company because the rate is 15%. So it is possible that I will show more sales at a higher price, okay, from my company, so that because the rate of taxation is very low, and my associate enterprise, they claim that purchases as the deduction. In order to avoid this, if such abnormal profits are arising to the assessee, in those cases the assessing officer will tax that abnormal profit at 30%. So very important point. Surcharge here also 10%, except in case of 115BAA. education says 4%, health and education says. Here also the MAT is not applicable. Okay, so that is one of the benefit. Conditions are same as 115 BAB. Okay, same conditions as we have discussed in the earlier slides. Now implication here also, once you are invalidate any condition, violate any condition, then in that case for that assessment year as well as for the subsequent assessment year, you will not be liable. You will not be able to opt for this scheme. Okay, it will be held as if you're not opted for the scheme, and the normal provision of the act will apply. Okay, yeah, but one year relaxation or one thing which is there here is, if you are opting, I mean, if you are wanting any condition under 115 BAB, then you can still shift to 115 BAA. Okay, you have got the option to shift from 115 BAB to 115 BAA. That is the point. The D point, very important point. The option has to be exercised in the first return of income, very important, and a distinguishing factor with respect to 115 BAA. In case of 115 BAA, say suppose I am an existing company, okay, I want to opt for 115 BAA. However, I have some brought forward losses, okay, house property loss or eligible business losses which are eligible. Okay, so I will plan out that once these losses or once this credit are set off, only then I will go for 115 BAA. Allowed. Okay, that is allowed. If I want to opt after 5 years, I am allowed to do it. However, in case of 115 BAB, you will have to claim this benefit of this scheme in your first assessment year itself. Okay, so says that the company set up in December 2019, then the first assessment year will be 2021. Then in this assessment year itself, the company will have to indicate that yes, they want to opt for this. They cannot opt in the subsequent assessment years. No. Okay, if the company is set up today, okay, that is financial year 2021, then in such kind of companies, if they want to opt for BAB, then they will have to indicate in assessment year 2021-22 itself, 21-22 itself. Okay, they cannot opt in after some other assessment year. Very important point. Yeah, the fifth, the last important point over is, in case of amalgamation of such kind of companies which are opted under this section, if the resulting company, okay, also fulfills the conditions which are enlisted in this section, then they can still avail the benefit under 115 BAB. So this was with respect to 115 BAB. Now we come to the changes in depreciation. Just a minute. Yeah, in order to boost the automobile sector, in the last financial year, CBDT had come up with a notification wherein they accelerated the rate of depreciation for motor cars. Okay, purchased from 23rd of August 2019 to 31st of March 2020. Please remember, this is not an additional depreciation. This is the increase in the rate of depreciation itself in rule number 5. Okay, so now instead of 30, you can claim 45 in case the motor vehicle is used for the purpose of hiring, flying. Okay, in all those cases, and in the normal course. Okay, if a company is purchasing a motor vehicle for the use of the directors or the employees of the company, in all those cases, earlier it was 15%, now it is 30%. So they have added 15% to it. However, it is only for the acquisition of the motor vehicle between 23rd of August to 31st of March. Okay, so it will not be applicable to the existing vehicles, okay, which were there even as on 22nd of August. Okay, it cannot be claimed for those kind of vehicles. So that was with respect to new rates of depreciation. In the ITS, they have given a new column, okay, for rate of 45, the rate of 45, they have inserted a new column so that additional the accelerated depreciation can be claimed. Now very important thing, that is proviso to clause number A of section 44AB. Okay, with respect to the audit. As you all know, the Finance Act 2020, they have come up with this new criteria for beneficial criteria for the assessee. In case where the transactions in cash are up to 5%, then the assessee will not be liable to do audit if the turnover is between 1 crore and 5 crore. Okay, so a very good provision which was inserted by them. Two things I would like to clarify here. At the time of budget, okay, several confusions were there with respect to how to calculate the total receipts or total payments, okay, while applying that 5% criteria. Okay, 5% of the receipt or 5% of the payment. So at that point of time, there was some conflicting views with respect to what should be included. Now, the ITR as well as the instruction sheets or the instruction module, they have clearly specified, okay, in the ITR itself that while calculating the receipt, you have to include the sales turnover, gross receipts, etc. Along with that, even capital contributions, okay, or loans taken. Okay, so all the capital account transaction can also be covered under this. So according to me, even if you're selling an asset, fixed asset, even that will be considered as a kind of capital account transaction, and even that can be taken in the total of the total receipts. Same way in case of payments, the actual payment made for the expenditure, etc., that all are obviously included. Apart from that, even payment on capital account transaction, say for acquisition of the new asset or repayment of the loan. Okay, so all those kind of payments will also be covered for calculating the limit of 5%. So that is very much clarified in the form itself. Now we just run through this item by item. So the first point is you have to indicate whether the assessee is liable to maintain books of account. In this case, obviously it will be yes, because the turnover will be between 1 crore and 5 crore. Okay, so obviously 144 AA books of account has to be maintained. Secondly, if the assessee is opting only for presumptive taxation, then obviously the question under this proviso will not come in question. Okay, it is not the case where you are opting only for a presumptive taxation, then you cannot go under this. So once you click no over there, once you click yes over there, all the subsequent field will be disabled, and once you click no, the subsequent field will be enabled. In the third point, you have to indicate whether your turnover is between 1 crore and 5 crore or not. Okay, obviously, if you want to go under this benefit, then yes, your turnover should be between this point. Now, come to a very crucial question. Okay, I have some personal doubts and personal view in this. Please read this question. I have summarized this question in the next slide. You have to indicate whether aggregate of all the amount received, including sales turnover, gross receipt, capital account, etc., during the previous year in cash does not exceed 5%. And the same question for payment. So now the question formed over here is negatively worded. They are asking whether the aggregate of all the amount in cash does not exceed 5%. So what should be your answer? And going by the grammar or going by the first impression, it will be yes. So if my turnover is say 3 crores and I want to opt under this benefit, then I have to indicate yes, so that the audit will not apply to me. Okay, however, this is a kind of question wherein you give some you give any answer, you will get the same results. I have just put it yes, it does not exceed 5%. Therefore, no, it does not exceed 5%. So because of this word does not, because of this word does not, there is some kind of second thought which may come. So what should we answer to it? Say in case if this word was not there, so they are asking whether it exceed 5%, then the answer would have been very much clear, yes. If yes, then it is exceeding 5%, then in those cases you will have to do audit. If you answer it no, then in all those cases your criteria, I mean the threshold is not complying, and you will not be able to you will not be required to do audit. Because of this, there is some confusion. However, as per my personal opinion, uh, compulsory, according to me, if you click yes in this question, then you will not be required to do audit. Okay, this is my personal opinion. However, I must admit that in certain section, okay, in certain part of the media or in certain professional journals, it has been mentioned that if you click yes, then you will be liable to do audit. However, I do not personally agree to this. Okay, that the extract of that particular article, etc., are in different context, and the answer is wavering. According to me, if you click yes, then you should not be liable to do audit. So this is with respect to some little confusion. Yeah, so this is the extract of the information module. Here also they are not specifying what is the implication of selecting yes or no. Okay, they have taken this sentence exactly from the statute itself. Okay, just copy pasted that thing over here, and then they have just indicated, please indicate what, this is what they have written. So there is no clarity with respect to implication of selecting yes or with respect to implication of selecting no. So one point, my personal view. Yeah, this is one of the favorite schedule which I encountered in this year's ITRs, that is schedule 80D. You know, one of the very simplest and one of the very beneficial provision for the assessees. However, one of the most complicated and most jumbled provision. You know, every year they come up with some or the other things, you know, some or the other field under this kind of section 80D. Okay, now this year, hats off to the software engineer and the chartered accountant who assisted him. They have come up with a separate schedule of 80D itself. Okay, a separate schedule for 80D. They have cracked this jumbled section. Okay, sometimes even me or anyone, you know, it is very much likely that we are not at all interested in reading that section because it is so much complicated, so much proviso, so much complex. Now I think this is the best thing they have done. Okay, and the fields given over here are they are disabled and enabled based on the answer which you give. Okay, so there are three things in the drop down. The question, if you answer it not claiming, so one is yes, no, and third is not claiming. So if you answer not claiming, then all the fields will be disabled. If you answer it yes, then only the appropriate corresponding field will be enabled, and all other field will be disabled, so that you can claim the exact amount which are actually which you're actually entitled to claim. So this new schedule 80D for the purpose of claiming mediclaim and other expenditure. This is just for your information, a tabulation of the amount which can be claimed under 80D, various permutation combination. Okay, so just for the information. Yeah, we come to the very important thing, which is script wise reporting with respect to long-term capital gains. Okay, under section 112AA. Up to last year, in last year's ITR, when it was notified, there was no schedule with respect to schedule 112AA or 2112AA. There was no schedule in that last year's ITR. However, subsequently, when the ITRs in Java utility or the Excel utility came out, there was this portion, there was this schedule inserted for script-wise reporting. In schedule CG, capital gain schedule also, there was separate column made for 112AA, wherein you have to mention what was the FVOC, cost of acquisition, what was the fair value on the month in the month of January, etc., for claiming grandfathering clause. Now, last year they had come up with a clarification that the assessee has the option to either fill up that script wise, or they can go with directly with the details in schedule CG itself. Okay, so that reporting fields were given for them for reporting every kind of information. However, in this ITR, in this year's ITR, if you see this schedule CG, in schedule CG only 3 lines are given with respect to 112AA. Okay, you cannot enter data like you entered in the last year. Okay, there was some confusion, there was a kind of error or calculation mistake which were happening, and hence they have not now dedicated this separate section itself, the schedule itself. Okay, wherein you will have to specify the script wise transaction of all the long term capital gains. The same will apply even to the non-resident under section 115 AD, the proviso to third clause of subsection 1. A good schedule wherein you have to fill up all the details and the data will be auto-populated. Your capital gains will be calculated accordingly. And from this schedule, your CG will be filled up. Okay, so this is just an example with respect to 112AA. This is capital. See here, in case the capital gain is 6 lakh rupees. Okay, so this automatically auto populates in schedule number CG. Okay, the amount will be auto populated and the details will be incorporated in schedule TI, total income. Now, as you all know, that there is exemption of 1 lakh rupees. Okay, under 112AA. So in that respect, if you see schedule SI, okay, in schedule SI, they have what they have done is they are not specifically indicating that you have been given that 1 lakh deduction. What they are doing is they are directly calculating the rate of tax after deducting that 1 lakh rupees. Okay, so from 6 lakh rupees, if you can see, they have deducted 1 lakh rupees, which comes to 5 lakh, and on that 5 lakh, they have applied the rate of 10%, and the rate coming corresponding tax is 50,000 rupees. So this is auto populated. Okay, so this was with respect to schedule 112AA, and the same kind of details has to be also to be provided in case of 115AD. Okay, for the non-resident. Now we come to the CBDT press release, which came out recently last in the month of September. So what are the points given in that press release? The first is there is no requirement a return of income for script wise report in case of short term or business income. So if the shares are held as short term investment, okay, short term capital gains, okay, short term I can say short term capital asset, then in that case no need to report in this. Secondly, if the shares are held as business in again business investment, stock in trade, I can say, in those cases also no need to report that in schedule 112A. Schedule 112A is only for capital gains. So if you held your shares as business income, as stock in trade, no need to report it in the schedule 112A. Second, this schedule is only for reporting long-term capital gain wherein the grandfathering benefit is been claimed. Okay, so this is kind of clarificatory thing which they have given. And in the last, they have specified that this is, this is to facilitate the taxpayer in correctly computing the LTCG. Okay, there were kind of little bit confusions every time because in every individual script also there is different scenario possible. So in last year's ITR there were some goof ups. Okay, something went wrong also. Okay, when the assessee was entering detail by himself. So now they have made it mandatory to fill up 112A. Okay, obviously, as Jayesh sir told earlier, in case of transaction, HNI, etc., where the investment is huge and the holdings are huge, it will be difficult for them to fill up each and every detail. But that is the want of the hour right now. We will have to fill up those details. Yeah. So last year, this exemption was given. In this year, there is no field available in CG for you to report manually your profit directly. In last year ITR it was available. This year ITR it is not available. Now we just run through the deductions, the new deduction which can be claimed, that is section 80AA. Okay, with respect to interest on loan from the financial institution for acquisition of a residential house property. So if the loan is sanctioned during the financial year 1920, and if the stamp duty value of your house does not exceed 45 lakh rupees, then you can claim an interest deduction of 1,50,000 rupees under this section. Okay, but however, if you claim that 1,50,000 in this section, then that 1,50,000 cannot be claimed under 24. Okay, for house property while determining the claiming the deduction of interest expenditure, you cannot use that 1,50,000. However, beyond that, say if your total interest expense is say suppose 3 lakh rupees, then 150 can be claimed under this, and the balancing can be claimed if eligible under 24B. So that is respect to 80AA. This is with respect to again the automobile industry. Okay, in this case also, if you're acquired a electronic vehicle, and for that if you are availing a loan from a financial institution, okay, then in that case you can claim that interest expenditure as your deduction under 80BBB. However, if you're claiming under 80BBB, you cannot claim it under, say, suppose section 3613. Okay, you cannot then claim it as a business expenditure. So only one deduction is allowed. Yeah, this is also important aspect of ITR, details of unlisted shares held by you. Okay, in almost every ITR, this details is required to be furnished. The very first point I would like to point out is here you will have to report if you're holding that unlisted equity share at any time. Okay, the stress on the word any time. So even if you're purchase that equity share for 1 day and you're selling that on the same day, still you will be able to report under this this column under part A of the general schedule. So what are the details as? Details as the name of the company, okay, type of the company, PAN number, then every details of the quantity detail as well as the consideration, cost of acquisition, number of shares acquired, okay, shares sold during the year, shares transferred during the year, etc., and the closing balance of this unlisted equity shares. Now there is some in the instruction module, there are some points which I would like to enumerate before you all. The first is, if you are having any shares of a foreign company, okay, listed outside India, okay, so this is kind of a company which is not in India, not listed in India. So you are not liable to report this kind of share in your ITR. Okay, so if it is listed on a foreign stock exchange, no need to report in this schedule. Secondly, say suppose you have n number of companies, okay, unlisted companies, then in this case, if you don't have the PAN number available, okay, if you don't fill up the PAN, then the error will pop up. So they have given this dummy PAN, you can enter this. Third very important point, say in case the unlisted shares come to you by way of gift or a will, or in case of amalgamation, etc. Okay, in all those cases, they have specifically mentioned that the cost of acquisition will be either zero, say suppose it's a gift or a will, etc., or the appropriate cost of acquisition, whatever you incurred. So that amount has to be specified. This is given in the instruction module. Now we come to the fourth point, very important. Please note that the details of the unlisted shares, okay, held during the year are required only for the purpose of reporting. Okay, so this column or this schedule is only for reporting purpose. It is not linked with your total income schedule. Okay, so whatever details you enter, say suppose quantity of shares, face value of shares, or cost of acquisition, sale value, they will not be impacting your total income. So this is the first point. Second very important point, even in case where you held unlisted equity shares as stock in trade of business during the previous year, you are required to report the same. Okay, so even if you are holding it as a stock in trade, as a business asset, in those cases also you are required to report this detail in the general information. Thirdly, we may have certain cooperative banks account in cooperating bank where we also have some shareholding of those cooperative banks. Then in such case, there is no need to report this kind of thing, this kind of shares in the unlisted category. The important point which I have highlighted in blue is that under this schedule or under this clause, what you have to see is that the company should be registered under Companies Act, and it must not be listed on any recognized stock exchange. Okay, only those kind of shares are to be reported under this schedule. So that was the first point. That was the concluding point with respect to reporting of. Yeah, that was the last point with respect to reporting of unlisted shareholdings. Just a minute. Now we come to the another very important point with respect to change in ITR 7, mostly relating to trust and other institution registered under various sections or clauses specified under section 10. I've got some legal points, okay, that is my own opinion as such. I would like the seniors in the group and the seniors in this meeting to please throw some light on this point which I'm going to raise now. 2 points with respect to changes in ITR. Okay, the first point is with respect to donation made as corpus donation to institution registered under section 1023C. So now existing law was, okay, it is that when a trust registered under section 12AA makes any corpus donation to another trust registered under 12AA, it shall not be considered as application of income. So this was the existing provision, okay, before the amendment. Okay, and hence the corpus donation made by that trust was not considered as application. Wide Finance Act 2020, with effect from 1st of April 2020, what they have come up with the amendment is, they are telling that when a trust registered under 12AA, okay, if they are donating a corpus donation to institution registered under section 10 clause 23C, that such corpus donation will also be not allowed as application of income. So what is the implied meaning? The implied meaning is, before this amendment came up, the trust were allowed to make corpus donation, and such corpus donation was allowed as application or allowed as deduction from the income of the trust. Now it is not allowed. Please mark the date. The date is 1st of April 2020. So now any trust making this donation, corpus donation to institution registered under 1023C cannot claim that corpus donation as its application of income. Now, the reporting requirement in ITR of last year, there were two columns: donation other than corpus and donation as corpus. Because in last year's ITR, it was allowed as application of income. In this ITR, it is not allowed. So if you can see, only one line is there, other than corpus. Whereas the donation forming part of corpus, okay, the donation which are in the nature of corpus donation, they are held as disallowable expenditure. So they will not be included while you calculate the deductions from your income. So this is the reporting requirement. Now I come to the point where I have some reservation or I have some doubts. My point is, the provisions, okay, this new provision came in force from 1st of April 2020. Okay, why Finance Act 2020? This was not even in the finance bill. This was announced at the enactment stage. So this provision is not even in the memorandum of association. So now when they are telling that this provision will come in force from 1st of April 2020, what should it ideally mean is any donation which is made on or after 1st of April 2020 to such institution registered under 1023C as corpus donation shall not be treated as application of income. Then now, why does ITR of AY 2021 has eliminated this thing? Okay, so just to clear out this point, say suppose I've taken this example which is in the form of table in front of you. Before this amendment came up, say in the last year, August 2019, I am doing the tax planning of my trust. I am estimating that I have income of 15 lakh rupees, out of which 15% will be reserved, okay, for the exemption criteria. Out of then the balancing amount, out of that balancing amount, I will apply 12%, 12 lakh rupees as my actual application for promoting the object of the trust, and 75,000 I will donate as a corpus donation to a specified institution registered under 1023C, and accordingly I calculated my total income as nil. So this was my tax planning in August 2019. However, now after the amendment of 2020, Finance Act 2020, they are telling that you cannot claim this as application of income. Okay, and even in the ITR, if I enter this 75,000 amount in the part C, okay, the disallowed amount, then obviously my tax liability will be more by 75,000. So my point over here is, according to me, it appears that this provision has been given a retrospective effect. Okay, I have planned something in August 19 as per the law applicable at that point of time, and accordingly I have taken my position. Now after this law coming in force from 1st of April 2020, okay, they are telling that it will be applicable even for ITR of AY 2021. Okay, this seems something kind of retrospective applicability or against the principle of promissory estoppel, according to me. However, I'm open for the discussion. I would like the seniors to highlight this point. So this was with respect to one legal point which I wanted to point out. The second is general, the new registration requirement which has come. Okay, and however, it is now postponed to the next year now. So they have disabled this entire section in the ITR itself. You are not required to fill it up, okay, because obviously it will be operating from the next financial year. Other details with respect to your registration has to be mentioned, as you were mentioning even in the last year ITR. So that was with respect to ITR 7. Now we come to transfer pricing adjustment, particularly the secondary adjustment, what we call. Let us understand this with the help of an example. Say suppose I am an Indian company, I have got an associate enterprise in Switzerland. Okay, I have borrowed some huge loan from them, and now I am paying interest. So now I have paid an interest of say 12 crore rupees to that associate enterprise in Switzerland. However, as per the rules of transfer pricing, the ALP works out to 10 crore rupees. I know that. So particularly, I know actually I've paid 2 crores more. As per the provisions of section 92 CE, I am required to repatriate that amount back to India within a stipulated time. Say suppose 90 days. Okay, there is a specified rule for that. If at all within that stipulated time, if the 2 crore rupees which are lying excess, okay, with the Switzerland company, if it does not come to me, then it will be deemed as if I have advanced that 2 crore to the Switzerland company. And accordingly, according to Rule 10 CB, the interest will be calculated on that deemed advance and it will be chargeable to tax. Finance Act number 2 of 2019 came up with subsection 2A, wherein they have told that if assessee wants, then he can pay additional income tax on this primary adjustment amount, okay, the excess amount of 2 crore, and then he will not be, even if the amount is not repatriated to India, it is fine. Okay, the secondary adjustment will not be required to be made in all those cases. Okay, so for an example, in our case, the adjustment, excess amount of 2 crore was lying with Switzerland. Actually, I should have repatriated that. Actually, I should have, got that amount back. But I'm not getting that amount back because of XYZ regulation rules, etc. So in that case, what I can do is, on the 2 crore, on the excess amount which is lying with the Switzerland company, I can pay additional income tax 18%, on which 12% surcharge will be applicable and 4% education cess will be applicable. Once I pay that, I will not be required to do any secondary adjustment. Okay, that income, I mean the computation of income, etc., interest income, etc., will not apply. Okay, and the tax which I am paying for this will be applied only towards this liability. Okay, so if you are paying the tax under this subsection 2A, it cannot be adjusted against your normal tax liability. So I have just taken a snapshot of this. Firstly, in schedule OI, you have to report whether you are exercising this option under subsection 2A. Okay, if you click yes, then schedule TPSA, that is transfer pricing secondary adjustment, this schedule will be enabled. Here you have to enter what is the excess amount which has not been repatriated. In our example, it is 2 crore. Automatically your tax liability will be calculated. Below that, you have to mention whether you paid that or not. Okay, so once that amount is paid, it will be applicable. It will be applied only for this liability. And secondly, you will not be required to and do any adjustment, secondary adjustment. So this was the new schedule which is they have brought in for transfer pricing adjustments. Yeah, and now coming to the next schedule, that is schedule PTI, that is pass through incomes. So this schedule was there even in the last assessment year. Okay, so there is no change in the law as such, but reporting requirement, whatever the changes are there, we'll just list it out. So pass-through income status has been, provided to kind of investment funds, okay, InvITs, REITs, alternative investment fund, category 1, category 2, etc. As per section 115 UA as well as 115 UB, such kind of investment funds can pass on their income to the ultimate unit holders. Okay, and that fund will not be liable to tax to such income, and the unit holders will be liable to tax. So this is the general provision. In the last Finance Act 2019, they had come up with a clause that even the losses which are incurred by such fund can be passed over to the unit holders. Okay, so the changes are with respect to that. I will just share you the screenshot and explain it one by one. So this is schedule PTI, that is pass through income. Here you will have to indicate what is the section under which you are getting the income from the, I mean, what is the section under which your fund is registered, either 115 UA or UB. Then you have to mention the income from that particular fund or loss. There is a column for share of current year losses distributed by the investment fund. So even losses can be claimed by you. So that is the new column inserted. So this is kind of reporting schedule. Here you just have to report the summary of all your investment in the AIFs or InvITs or REITs. However, very important, this schedule is not linked with your total income schedule. So corresponding schedule has to be filled up. So say suppose you are getting income from house property, okay, as a house property from the unit REITs, okay, from REITs you are getting from house property. Then in that case, you have to report that income even in income from house property schedule. There is a specific line item which is given, and they have mentioned that income from pass-through income. Okay, pass-through income, that thing is given. You have to fill it up over there. Same way for capital gains, there is a separate schedule. I mean, separate line item when you have to specify that this is your pass-through income or loss. Okay, so just by filling up this schedule, it is not sufficient. You will have to fill up the corresponding schedule. Please remember, otherwise your income will not be reported in the schedule TI, total income. If you see schedule CFL, in CFL they have given a specific column, okay, for reporting the pass-through income under the specified heads. Okay, so house property, there is written PTI, that is pass-through income. This is for the unit holders, so they are getting any losses from that funds. Okay, then they have to mention this loss over here according to the assessment year applicable. Same way, in case of funds, if the funds are passing on that losses to the unit holders, obviously that same losses cannot be carried forward by them. So for that purpose, in case of funds, they have given this line item wherein the funds have to indicate what amount of losses they have already passed on to the unit holders. So that amount will be reduced from that carry forward loss amount. So just a reporting required with respect to pass-through incomes. Yeah, just a minute. Yeah, this is a very common and small point with respect to interchangeability of PAN and Aadhaar. In the last budget, we all saw that finance minister was talking about the Aadhaar, stressing on Aadhaar. In this case, section, under section 139A, they had specifically inserted a subsection, that is subsection 5E. As per subsection 5E, it was mentioned that if a person is not having a PAN number, but if that person is holding an Aadhaar, then he can use the Aadhaar in lieu of PAN. Okay, instead of PAN, he can use the Aadhaar, and he has to be allotted PAN in the due manner. So whatever specified manner is that, he has to be allotted PAN, but till that time he can use the Aadhaar number. Same way, in case a person is having PAN as well as Aadhaar, okay, he is holding both. In all those cases, he can use either of them, okay, in ITRs or for any purpose under this act. Okay, as you all know, in several clauses of ITRs, okay, you have to mention the PAN number of the opposite party. Say in case of bad debts exceeding 1 lakh rupees, or in case of a transporter, okay, who holds less than 10 vehicles. In that case, TDS has to be not to be deducted. In all those cases, PAN has to be reported. However, if the PAN is not available, then that person can give Aadhaar number also. So this is the list of field wherein Aadhaar can be used instead of PAN. Okay, earlier only PAN was allowed. Now even Aadhaar can be used. Okay, in case of even tenancy, co-owner, etc., buyer of immobile property, etc. This is the list of it. Just a general information. Yeah, this is with respect to 43B. Okay, allowable of allowance of expenditure only if the payment is made. So in the last budget, they had come up with this thing that interest payable to NBFC, okay, or systematically important non-deposit taking NBFC, if the interest is payable to them, then it will be allowed only if it has been actually paid during the financial year or as per before the filing return of income as per the section 43B. Okay, so earlier, even if you are passing a accrual entry, provision entry in your books for that interest, it was allowed even if you are not paid that. Now they are allowing only if you are paying that interest, actually paying that interest. So this reporting requirement is in schedule OI. In OI, if there is any amount which is not paid, you have to disallow that amount for the relevant assessment year. Sure. So that was with respect to 43B. Yeah, this is quoting of document identification number. So what is document identification? You all must be aware now what is document identification number. In order to link all this e-assessment and e-appeals, and in order to centralize everything, they have come up with this new concept of DIN. So now whenever you're filing any revised return, okay, sorry, not revised return, or defective return, return in response to defective notice, or under section 142(1) or reopening notice on case of search and seizure, or if you are applying for condonation of delay under section 119(2)(b), and pursuant to that order you are filing return of income, then it is mandatory for you to quote that DIN number. Without that DIN number, you will not be able to upload the ITR. So this is now mandatory. Also, a general point with respect to all the ITRs, payment of refunds. Earlier, up to last year, only one account you can choose. You can choose for crediting of the refund. Now you can choose multiple account, and the CPC will determine in which account the credit must be given. One important point in the instruction note which they have given is that as such you are required to report all the accounts in the bank accounts in the general schedule. However, if your account is non-operational for more than 3 years, then that account is not required to be mentioned in that clause. Secondly, for non-resident, they have come up with this new thing. Many non-resident may not have bank account in India. So what about the refunds? So they have come up with this thing that in case of non-resident, if they are not having bank account in India, they can give the details of their foreign bank account. So the SWIFT code is like IFSC code, name of the bank, the country of that non-resident, and IBAN. IBAN is the international banking account number which you have to specify, and accordingly the refund will be credited to that foreign account. So this with respect to the refunds. Now some other points with respect to small point with respect to changes in ITR. The first is with respect to the changes which came in the last budget. Okay, that even now SSC who is a builder or a developer, okay, in those cases he can the stock in trade, the unsold flat units or unsold properties, they can be held as they can be held at nil value. Okay, the ALV will be nil for 2 years after the completion certificate is received. However, in case of ITR 5 and ITR 6, there were only two types of category. Okay, that was let out and deemed let out. Okay, and you can write nil against the ALV only when the property is self-occupied. So they have inserted this thing, okay, self-occupied criteria in ITR 6 as well as ITR 5, so that such kind of properties which are held as stock in trade can be treated at nil value. So this is in consequent to the amendment. The other 2 points are with respect to drop downs which are there in Schedule OS. Okay, now you have to report a dividend received from a foreign entity wherein you hold 26%, okay, of interest, 26% of the shareholding. Then all those dividend are required to be specifically required to be mentioned in Schedule OS. Earlier there was no specific field item. Now they have given a specific field item. Similarly, for non-resident and foreign companies, okay, where the income is chargeable, royalty or technical fees income are chargeable under section 115A under that particular provision. In that case also their field item is given. You have to report your income in that field item only. The fourth point is general. List of employers or employee, they have included state government also. Earlier there was only central government. Now they have inserted state government. The last point is very simple point with respect to last year if you see the ITRs, in case of India's compliant ITR 6, there is a specific schedule for India's reporting. At the end of India's reporting, they have mentioned a clause where no books of accounts are maintained. Obviously, if a company is there and if they are liable to do, they are liable for India's reporting, then there is no need for that kind of category, no books of accounts. So they have removed that, not a big point. So this was basically with respect to changes in ITRs of AY 2021. I have taken up this schedule foreign asset reporting. No change with respect to last year. However, certain points from the instruction module which we can revise so that a proper reporting can be done. Schedule FA, that is foreign assets. And a very long list of reporting which is required to be done under this schedule. Okay, your accounts, custodian account, equity, insurance, okay, immobile property, capital asset, etc., etc. So the instruction which you need to keep in mind while filling up these details. First, If you are resident in India, you are required to furnish detail of any foreign asset. So once you are a resident, you will have to fill up this schedule if you have any foreign assets. First point. Second, there are criteria for holding the asset, okay, the bank account, etc. So even if you are a beneficial owner or a beneficiary or the legal owner, so that they have given the definition of a beneficial owner in the instruction module. It says that when a consideration is paid by the one person and the benefit of it, okay, benefit of that asset goes to that same person or to any other person, that person will be considered as a beneficial owner. Beneficiary, obviously the person who is benefiting from that asset, even though is not the actual owner, that is the beneficiary. Legal owner are generally interchangeably used with the beneficial owner in this concept. The title documents in the name of the actual person. One thing which they have given is that generally the legal owner will also be the beneficial owner in most of the cases. Then in such case, in the drop down, you will have to select. There is a drop down, the type of owner. So in the type of owner drop down, you have to select as a legal owner. Okay, in case when you are both of them. Fourth point, the schedule need not be filled up if you are not ordinary resident or a non-resident. So this schedule is applicable only for R and OR. It will not be applicable for R and NOR or NR. Okay, it is not applicable for them. Here also the details are required to be mentioned even if the asset is held even for a single day. Okay, even if the within the year if you square off or if you sold off that property or bank account etc anything, still you are liable to report. The second last point over here is that if you have foreign asset during the previous financial year which have been reported in schedule AL. Okay, so there are two kind of schedules in the ITRs, schedule FA as well as schedule AL. In schedule AL, you have to report the assets and liabilities. So even if you are reporting this asset, foreign asset in schedule FA, still you will have to mention that foreign asset in schedule AL also. So double reporting is required. They have specifically mentioned. And while obviously the foreign asset is there, the consideration will be in that particular foreign exchange, that foreign trade. In those cases, in the instruction module, they have given that the conversion should be made as per the TTBR, okay, telegraphic time buying rate, okay, as per the SBI. So whatever the rate of TTBR is there, as per the State Bank of India, that rate of foreign exchange, I mean, that rate of conversion has to be adopted. So that was with respect to reporting of the foreign asset. No change, just a revision. This is the schedule AL, the asset liability schedule. So it is there in ITR 2, 3 as well as 6. First we'll go to 2 and 3. In ITR 2, it is applicable only if the total income exceeds 50 lakh rupees. For ITR 2, so it is case of non-business assessee. In ITR 3, so ITR 3 is for obviously for business assessee also. So here they have given a relaxation that if you are reporting that particular asset in your balance sheet, okay, you are required to fill up balance sheet in ITR 3. So if it is reported over there, then it is not required to be reported in schedule AL. And second point, schedule AL will be applicable only if the total income exceeds 50 lakh. So that is the first point. And second point, if it is reported in BS balance sheet, then no need to report it again in schedule AL. Here the point of differentiation is the assets and liabilities should be at the end of the relevant assessment year, or the 31st of March 2020 in our case. Okay, so it is not like schedule FA that even if you held for one day, it has to be reported. It has to be as on the last date of the relevant previous year. Here, if you are non-resident or not resident but not ordinary resident, only the details of asset located in India are to be mentioned. So this is schedule AL, asset liability. If the assessee is non-resident, then the assets or liabilities, okay, which are of pertaining to India, okay, only the Indian asset and liability are to be reported, not the foreign. So this is the fourth point. And the last point is same. Even if you are filling up this, okay, schedule AL schedule, still if you have foreign asset, you will have to fill up foreign asset schedule. Now, computational part of this schedule AL in case of ITR 2 and ITR 3. So you're liable to report, you're required to report the cost of the asset. Okay. And obviously this can be referred by the tax authorities or even by the assessee in the subsequent assessment years when the assessment may come up, okay, for a particular asset, say suppose bullion, jewelry, etc., anything. So what should be the cost of asset? So for the purpose of this schedule, the amount in respect of asset to be reported will be the cost price of such asset, obviously the cost of acquisition of that asset, or whether wealth tax return was filed. So if the asset is old asset at the time of wealth tax, at the time when the wealth tax returns were applicable, if that asset is reported in that return, then the value adapted in all those returns. In addition to that, you can add the cost of improvement made to that asset. So that is with respect to cost, how to ascertain the cost. Secondly, if the asset has come to you by way of gift or will, okay, then the provisions of section, by virtue of section 49(1), in all those cases, what will be the cost of asset? The cost of asset, very important, will be the cost of the previous owner. Okay, so here you need not report zero. In case of unlisted shares, we saw in that schedule, if it is by way of gift, then you have to report it zero. However, here you will have to report the cost of asset for the previous owner. This will be for reference for department as well as for assessee for the future years. Okay, and obviously you can add the cost of improvement made by the previous owner as well as by the assessee himself. And last, in case the cost at which the asset was acquired by the previous owner is not ascertainable, okay, so it is very old and it's not ascertainable, or whether wealth tax returns are not available, okay, they are not filed. In those cases, the rate will be as per the bullion rate or the circle rate, okay, the fair market, as we can say generally. Okay, so the cost you have to mention as per those rates, bullion rate or circle rate, the fair rate. So this was with respect to ITR 2 and ITR 3. Now, schedule AL1 for ITR 6. For ITR 6, every unlisted company have to report, compulsory report schedule AL. Now, it is not mandatory for the listed company. However, for unlisted company, it is mandatory. Now, the point here is, even if you are filling a balance sheet, whole balance sheet, your assets are reflected in that balance sheet also. Still, if you are an unlisted company, you have to again report the same in schedule AL. Okay, the very first point. In ITR 3, they have given this exemption. But according to me, in ITR 6, there is no such clarificatory instruction given for ITR 6, whether the double reporting has to be made or not. So according to me, it's better that you report it again in schedule AL. This schedule is not required to be filled up by a foreign unlisted company. So if there is any foreign unlisted company, they are not required to fill up this schedule. Similarly, for startups, okay, there is a separate schedule AL2. Okay, the fields are identical to AL1. Okay, but for startup they have given a separate schedule itself. So in that case, startup have to fill up in that AL2. Fourth important point, while reporting the assets, one asset would be your stock in trade. So here they have given some relaxation that when you're reporting your stock in trade, you will have to enter the consolidated value itself. Okay, so no individual assets are to be filled up. You can directly sum up the aggregate amount, okay, the aggregate cost of that asset in the stock in trade. However, you will have to indicate against that asset that yes, you are using this as your stock in trade. So consolidated amount will have to be entered in stock in trade details. Rest of the asset have to be given asset wise. In case of an unlisted company hold foreign asset during the previous year. So this is also last point, also similar to the earlier slide, that even if you are filling up AL sheet and you're reporting your foreign asset in AL, still you will have to report it in schedule FA, foreign asset schedule. Yeah. So that was with respect to a revision, small revision of schedule FA and schedule AL. Now we come to the changes in ITR-V and ITR acknowledgement. Till last year, we had only one form, that is form ITR-V. Okay, whenever you file the return of income, ITR-V will be generated. However, there were two kinds of ITR-V. One which was already verified or e-verified. In those cases, there was a line at the end that please do not send this ITR to CPC Bangalore. Okay, so that was with respect to e-verified ITRs or a verified ITR. However, if the ITR is not e-verified, then in all those cases, you will have to send that ITR, physical ITR signing the SSG, and you have to send it to the CPC Bangalore within 120 days. Okay, so this was with respect to last year, up to last year. Now in this year, what they have come up with is ITR-V. This ITR-V will be generated in case you have not e-verified your ITR. So if you can see, there are no details of income. Okay, tax payment detail, tax credit detail, total income, GTI deduction, nothing is there. Just a plain form that I have filed this in return of income, and this is my PAN number, and I am the assessee. This has to be sent to CPC Bangalore within a period of 120 days. So that is the time limit. Okay, and after the verification has been done, say you have e-verified, or either you have sent that to CPC and CPC has verified it. Then in that case, a new form has come, that is income tax return acknowledgement. So this is the form which will come out. Okay, this is the form which will be sent to your email, as well as you can download it from your e-filing portal, wherein the entire details which were there in the present ITR-V, of the last assessment year, all those details will be mentioned over here. So this was with respect to ITR-V, changes in ITR-V. Just to point out, it has to be sent, ITR-V has to be sent within 120 days if it has not been e-verified. So this was it from my side with respect to changes in ITR. I really appreciate and thank for each and every participant for this patient hearing, and also much obliged to JB Nagar Study Circle, a very prestigious study circle, Seema ma'am, Jayesh sir, for giving me this opportunity to present myself on this topic. So I think this was it from my side. Due acknowledgement to the colleagues who have helped me out in this. Seema ma'am, this is it from my side. I think we can take up the question answer session now.
Yes. Thank you, Shashank. It is a great presentation, very nicely presentation, and you covered each and every aspect of the changes as well as updation in the ITR forms. Thank you for the same. Now, Purvi will share her screen. She must be listed all the queries raised by the participants.
Fine.
You please stop sharing your screen so that she can
share.
Sure.
Many questions, so let's just go through them quickly. The first question, all ITR utility has a problem of calculating dividend received on shares as against 10%.
Yeah, just a minute.
So,
is this question sheet visible to all the participants?
Yes, yes.
Yes, it is.
Yes, then I will just read out the question and answer to it. No problem.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. You need not have to read. Shashank.
Yeah, fine.
Okay, no problem.
No problem. Fine. Yeah, with respect to first question, I think it will depend on the utility version. According to me, I think they are accepting it properly. It is taxable at 10%. However, it is very much possible that some older version is there, or if you are using a customized software, in that software that that link is not given for a particular formulation, whereby which it may be calculating at 30%. However, please ensure that in schedule OS, okay, whether there is any specified criteria of dividend, okay, in the dividend criteria, you are mentioning your amount properly, and even in the drop down, if there is a specific field wherein a different kind of dividend is received, or if your dividend is exceeding 10 lakh, then that specified field is item line is properly filled up. According to me, obviously I will again look into it, but according to me, it is properly calculating depending on the version of utility and the changes in ITR.
Okay.
Deemed letter of okay, so the second question, it's a kind of legal question. First of all, say the law provides that the assessee can opt for 2 SOPs. Okay, assessee can opt for 2 SOP. However, if you read the provision specifically mentioned that it has to be used by him. Okay, so if you ask as a legal language, if you go by legal language, if the second property is actually used by you for staying or for any other purpose, if it is used, then yes, you can treat it as a SOP. However, it is completely vacant. Okay, you are not using it at all. Then there can be a legal point whereby the assessing officer may contend that there is no actual use of that property by the assessee, and hence it can be treated as DLOP. However, if you can prove that yes, it was held, it was used for some part of time, then yes, you can claim it as SOP, the second SOP. Yeah, the third is with respect to cooperating housing society nature of business. Yeah, I think they have come up with a new line item just last week, I suppose, wherein they have mentioned that in those case you can mention AOP, partner, etc. There is, if you go scroll down to the line item, there is a field of AOP and partner form. There is something like that. You can select that in case of nature of business. Yes, I think in the last update they have come up with this in ITR 7. Yeah, specifically in ITR 7, just 2 days back they have come up with this. You can just go through it. Ma'am, the screen is disabled.
Hello, Purvi. Hello, Purvi. Your screen, please share your screen. Please unmute yourself. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, the internet,
No.
the issue with the internet.
So, Kukreja sir, if you can just check out, I think on the 4th of November or 5th of November, they have come up with the updated utility of ITR 7, I suppose, wherein they have inserted this option. I think your query will be resolved by that. Just update your utility. Ma'am, can you please scroll down? Purvi ma'am, can you? Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah. So the next question, this schedule again change on 4th November. New schema 11288. Okay, the 6th question. No, I think I skipped something. Yeah, the 4th question is with respect to 115 BAA. House property income can we get standard? Yes. In 115 BAA, they have specifically mentioned that for other income, the rate, for all kind of income, the rate is 22% only. In that case, yes, the deduction is allowable. 30% deduction can be claimed. Even under section 53, you can claim the deduction against the income of IFRS. Under 115 BAA, it is allowed, no problem. Under 115 BAB, not allowed. Cash. Yeah, KDS sir, your question is whether capital introduced by a partner in cash is also included in receipt to calculate 5%. According to me, now the law as well as the ITR are very much broad and wide. Okay, they have specifically mentioned the word capital account. Okay, so any kind of capital receipt or capital payment, according to me, will be covered over here. Okay, so in that, even cash consideration has to be covered. Okay. Nikhil Vadia, this change to 4th November. Yeah, the 4th November change, I suppose, I think I tracked this thing just day before yesterday. There is nothing with respect to, fields of 112A. There is no change in that according to me. Okay, only the calculation methodology, there is some linkage, in the schema, they have done some changes. I don't think the interface has changed. Okay, and broadly, if you see 112A, all the fields are, all the mandatory fields are already covered up over there, and the reporting requirement is proper in that. According to me, I don't think it will affect anything with respect to total income or any additional reporting requirement are given up in this schema. That was with respect to question number 6.
Yeah, 7th one.
Yeah, 7th one, ESOP listed abroad, sold in a week. Okay, so I think this will be a kind of short-term capital asset. Okay, and it will be, I think it will go under the general category. Okay, I'm not specific with respect to section of this particular transaction. According to me, as it will be taxable at the normal slab rate or the applicable rate, it has to be mentioned in the normal category. It should not be mentioned under 111A, 111A. You cannot mention under that. You will have to mention it in the general category so that the applicable tax will be, applicable. However, if a special rate of tax is given for this kind of shares, then obviously there will be some category for listing that drop down, which will have to be selected. Yes, Meenakshi, yeah,
We will share
the PPT, yeah.
We will share the PPT.
Yeah.
And Shashank, Purvi, please stop sharing the screen.
Yes.
And there are a couple of questions in the chat box. Can you cover those questions?
Just a minute, ma'am.
Yeah, this one more came in. This one.
How to withdraw appeal online filed before CIT appeal for the purpose of VV scheme for filing Form 4 under the said scheme?
Vivad se Vishwas. Okay, fine. I think in this respect, when you're filing the Vivad se Vishwas form, you're giving the declaration of withdrawing, I mean, the pending appeals. So obviously it will be covered under that also. And I think online require, I'm not at all aware of it right now. But I think at the time of hearing, you may just give an application that we have made this application under VSV. But I think this is divergent from the topic.
No, it is not related. Okay, if shares allotted by foreign parent company to Indian resident individual, whether it will be foreign asset for reporting purposes.
Yes, of course. Yes. You are holding of shares of a foreign company. Yes.
Okay. If client has so many transactions of short-term capital gain, then what will be mentioned in 112A? Only figure, purchase, sale, or no script name?
No. With respect to 112A, the CBDT, even in my PPT, I've already covered that for the short-term capital gain, you are not required to report anything in 112A, only for long-term capital assets. I mean, long-term capital gain from specified shares. So no need to report anything with respect to short-term capital gains on arising on transaction of shares and securities in 112A. Nothing to be done. It is covered in my PPT also.
If shares received as retirement benefit by NRI, now resident need to report as foreign asset. If shares
received as
retirement benefit.
No, so assessee is whether he is resident or he is non-resident.
Non-resident Indian.
Yes, now the particular So if he is resident, yes, he will have to
report. Yes.
Yes, he will have to.
Okay,